Thursday together. It's June. So we're halfway through the year. That kind of scares me when I say it out loud, but it also excites me because that means for 6 Thursdays, we've been getting together to share lots of great ideas and curriculum. I'm very, very excited that we have Randy Seagraves with us today. Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go is one of the curriculum. Whenever I go to a military installation and have this book with me, they always beg me to leave it. I think they love it for its versatility. Those who have gardens, it helps them feel confident in their gardening. Those who don't, it has such great information on nutrition in such a fun way. So it's a really, to me, versatile curriculum, even though it's designed as that junior master gardener. Well, I know Randy's going to tell us much more than I ever can. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you from Texas A&M and the Junior Master Gardener program, Randy Seagraves, who will be hosting today. We are being recorded. You're welcome to turn on your cameras and your microphones, particularly when we're having conversation, and to add to things at the same time. If you feel better with that, camera off, no worries at all. So Randy, it's to you, and we can't wait to learn, grow, eat, and go.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate all of you welcoming me into this space and look forward to sharing with you how I can use this program to impact your kids, military families. And I think what your introduction, Jenny, was perfect. This is an easy to use curriculum. So I promise you, if you feel like you don't have a brown thumb, if you have a green thumb, if you have something in between, we're going to give you some resources to be able to help you be successful in having garden projects and kids that both thrive with this effort. So I'm going to get started this third Thursday together. It's a great time to be able to share with you guys. And I mentioned as the people first came into the room, we want you to be ambassadors on our behalf and share with others within your circles to help them be aware of this programming, because we've got some great data that shows this can really impact kids in the larger family units as well. So during our little window of time together, we want you to have a pretty good working knowledge of the lessons and activities that make up the content of the Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go curriculum. We want you to give some resources that you can be comfortable with having your kids be established as leaders to have the student-led garden project. We want to show you some resources that are available online for free for being able to support your garden project as well. And then we want you to be able to kind of get in the family of our extension world at our national level with our state level partners throughout the country and show you how to register your JMG group for free as well. So we can know about you and they can know about you and potentially support your efforts even further with the groups that you are working with. So the curriculum we talk about for level 1 is our elementary age content. So we have different resources that have been out over the years. This is our core curriculum. It's made up of a teacher guide and a kid's handbook. It's kind of modeled after the adult master gardener content along the way. There's some theme-based resources you see there that are based on different themes of literature and a project with the National Wildlife Federation called Wildlife Gardener. And the one we're talking about today, though, is the Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go curriculum. And then we'll share a little peek at a relatively new resource that's a virtual version of that content as well. So before I even get started, I wanted to ask you this question. I want to know what experiences, if you have yet, with working with kids. And you can just kind of turn your screen off since we have a smaller group and kind of just tell me, or if you feel more comfortable in the chat, I would love to be able to hear more about you. So first, raise your hand if you've had any experiences doing some gardening projects with kids or supporting teachers and groups. So I see a few hands up there as well. Okay. And then in your chat, or just kind of telling us out loud, what are the ages of kids you work with or you envision working with this project? Because I mentioned this is something specifically geared towards our elementary age kids, but I tell you, we have kids as young as kindergarten that have been used and teachers adapted down. And you have older students that are at the high school level that kind of adapted up as well. So I see a lot of you guys are in that same realm of that preschool, that kindergarten, that early childhood age on up through 12th grade. So I think you're going to see how these resources really work to be able to meet those kids at their level. And before I leave, I'll share with you a specific resource you might have access to in the future that is specifically geared towards our early childhood audiences. Okay, so I want you to kind of get a connection to my background is education. I used to teach before I started working for Extension. I used to teach third graders. And this is a shot of one of our kids that was harvesting a part of the garden that these kids had access to, that they could choose to plant in things from home, and they could choose not to, or they could choose to take care of and water not to. It's just their space. So it was totally belonging to them. The shot you see of this kid here, he had brought in a teeny tiny container of these little chives he had planted in his little section of the garden. And what was crazy about that, he really tended to that. And over the window of time, about 3 to 4 weeks, that thing had quadrupled in size. It was happy where it was at. And so what you see in the picture there is the shot of the kid harvesting those chives leaves and taking one of those chives leaves and putting it in his mouth. And you see the girl walking up and she says, "What is that?" And she says, "These are chives, these are good." And he hands her one and she takes it and starts showing it. She says, "This is good." And then it goes to every single member of this classroom. So by the time we came in from recess that day, all 22 of these 8 and 9-year-olds were chewing on chives leaves coming in. So the whole adage you've seen before, you probably heard before, if you work with kids directly, you've seen it, even anecdotally, if they grow it, kids are more likely to eat it or give it a chance. And this was something presented by a peer, and that made it even better. So that was a starting point of different conversations and realizations of the impact it has when kids are part of these garden environments. And so there was a research study that, coupled with the development of this curriculum called Health and Nutrition from the Garden, that was out several years ago. And we took that and adapted it and measured the impact for these audiences of kids. And what came from that study was the Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go curriculum. It was a large-scale study, had about 1,600 kids. And one thing that's interesting to know is that these were from Title I school settings. So we're talking about low socioeconomic populations. That was an exclusive group we dealt with this research study. An exposure of the implementation of this curriculum. And just to share with you quickly some of the data that was a part of that, you had all kinds of things you see represented there that are benefits from kids' preferences of eating and actually using those. But what's kind of cool, you guys, is that we had data that showed that kids, again, these 8 and 9-year-olds from these Title I campuses were taking the things that they learned and taking them home, taking recipes that were shared as a part of the study and taking them home. And there's data that shows that these kids were doing that. They were going to grocery shopping with parents. They were purchasing these items that were shared at school. They were implementing these recipes. They were gardening together, all that within this Title I communities across the area. The cool data that kind of raised some eyebrows is those kids that took part in the study. There's also a significant reduction in BMI for those kids who were utilizing the curriculum. So that's great for helping us to kind of get in the door, because different people have different groups of interests and passions for the impacts, the benefits. And some people, the health factor of that was a big part of what made it important. For some of us, it's the other benefits, and it's the academic benefits or the socio-emotional benefits or the leadership qualities that are built that are all a part of that. So I want to get a chance in a little bit of time that we have with you today is to give you a quick overview of what the Learn, Grow, Eat, Go curriculum is all about, and some good working familiarity as we step through the content. So as a starting point, the name of the curriculum, Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go, is not just the name. It's really kind of how it is structured in the facets that make up the curriculum. The Learn section of the curriculum is just full of these lessons that is the leader or the teacher walks the kids through. It's kind of the meat of the program. It's the content. The Grow section, there's a whole tabbed area of that is just full of information to help you have a successful gardening experience. We'll share more about that in a few minutes. It's about food exposures in this Eat section, and we have some great ways that kids are going to have fresh samples that they're going to be able to evaluate, as well as some prepared recipes that they can do together in a group setting. And then some weekly Go activities that are fun things they can do to really kind of get their bodies moving that are helpful. We'll talk more about that as well. So what is the curriculum? It is a 10-week program. It's designed to be held about 2 times per week over those 10 weeks. Now that can be shrunk down to a tighter window of time or expanded if you have longer than that. So the way it's presented in this linear format, the step-by-step format, is designed to be done that way in that order, but the pace you move through it is really pretty flexible. A lot of people think this is just garden science. It is really across all standards. And the cool thing about this is we have as many language arts kinds of correlations to standards as we do other areas too. So if you're working these more informal settings in these youth groups, academic standards may not be a big part of it, but your local schools and teachers, I think, would appreciate the fact you're working to help them be successful on some of these other areas in real relevant math and science and language as they're having these experiences. Okay, so this is what I wanted to share with you too. This is a page right before you get to the Learn section. This is the page that kind of shows the contents of the curriculum, and you see all 10 weeks of those lessons. So you're having those 20 lessons over that period of 10 weeks time, okay? And if you look, on this chart, you'll also see in the next column of this chart, there is each week, there is going to be a featured vegetable or crop you're really going to have the kids be familiar with and be exposed to. And of that 10 weeks of time, we really only need you to fill in about 6 of those with featured crops that are seasonal crops during that window of time. And you'll see the first one there is already done for you. It's pre-programmed in for carrots. That's all we're talking about, the carrot seeds today too, Jenny, is that's the focus for that week. And you'll see why here, because as they have their first food exposure, the evaluation is going to be with carrots, and the recipe is going to be with carrots too. So that carrots is kind of that theme, for that week. Then the last column you'll see on this chart is what that GO experience is, that physical activity component. And your kids are going to love that. And there's some great research benefits to kids taking part in this as well. Okay, so we're going to have you just walk through this first few weeks of the curriculum with us. Weeks 1 through 4. There's a copy, the image of what the cover of the book looks like there. The very first experience is an activity called No One Shows Sombrero. And the kids are going to make a wearable hat. And you can see the steps there of the kid having their head wrapped up in newspaper or bulletin board paper. It could be gift wrap that kids bring in from house, and some of the leftover gift wrap from Christmas, whatever it is. And they use packing tape to actually wrap their head out to create the brim, the band of the hat. And they'll curl up the excess paper to kind of make the brim of the hat, and they'll decorate it. And their job is to decorate it with things that plants need. You may have seen it at Flash before, but we give kids a little memory device of what plants need. They need a place to grow, they need light, they need air, they need nutrients, they get thirsty, and they need soil or some other medium to be able to grow into. So that is the first experience they have with this program, as they learn about plant needs in this very novel way. They go home telling their parents about what they did as the leader wrapped their heads up in newspaper, and they learned about plant needs. The fun part of this is it's novel and it's a cool experience. The kids have fun, they get to be creative, and they'll remember these plant needs. But the real benefit of this is later on, as plants are being planted, if there happens to be any kind of an issue with some plant not being successful, or some garden that's having some plants that are getting droopy or this or that, a lot of times kids will come back to the starting point of which one of those plant needs is not being met. And they'll think about that PLA and TS to be able to have that evaluation kind of experience. So the second lesson for week 1 is called 5 Senses Foods. And this is a really kind of a cool experience as we think about teaching the concept for kids that you don't just eat with your sense of taste, you really eat with all 5 senses. And so this starts out as kind of the discussion of sensory words. And you see on the screen, there's a sample paragraph of the leader, the teacher, talking about strawberries. And this description has the act of just kind of getting the food and looking at it and smelling it and taking a bite and what that experience is. But the cool part about that is all those words relate to all 5 of those senses. So you don't just eat with your sense of taste. So what we're doing as a part of this first lesson is you're going to have these fresh baby carrots for the kids, and you're going to have them not taste them to see really if they like them or not. It's not about liking or don't liking, it's about evaluating. And we're going to challenge your kids with this first exposure is to give each of these food items they're going to be presented with over the next several weeks a chance just based on a report card grade. So they can give it an A, B, C, D, or F on each of the 5 senses. And you'll see the order that's there. Taste is kind of at the bottom. So at the very first, they're going to evaluate it based on its appearance and the color and how fresh it looks and the smell and then the feel of the texture and then the sound it makes when you bite it, which, by the way, these carrots make cool little popping sounds when you bite them. With a group, you have all these pops happening all around you at the same time. It's kind of a cool thing. But the idea is that we're going to have kids evaluated on all these components. So even if you have a kid who thinks that he or she does not like the taste of carrots, we're kind of challenging them to be objective scientists with this experience. And they're going to evaluate it. Even if they don't like the taste of it, they're going to have to give it a fair grade, even based on the texture as they're chewing it. And so it's kind of cool to see kids kind of rise up and say, you know what, I really don't like the taste of this, but the texture is kind of fresh and it's crisp. And it kind of feels good as I'm chewing it in my mouth, that kind of a thing. So you give it a grade on each one of these things. And this is the first starting point to having kids really kind of evaluate things in this whole effort to have them be more adventurous in their eating and trying new things. So that's the first week, you guys, is those 2 lessons. And then we finish up each week with a journal exercise. And you see with this one, with these journal pages, there's a place there at the top where kids can kind of make notes of what they've learned earlier, like the PLA and TS you see listed. Sometimes there is an open-ended kind of creative portion of that you see kind of in the middle. But that evaluation component happens there at the bottom where you see the tasting of the carrots. What's cool about this is after you have the initial lesson of the 5 senses food and they evaluate carrots, then with each subsequent journal time, that they might have, or they're making notes about their learning experience for that day, there's a chance for them to have another food exposure. So like for the next week, you might come by with the baby spinach leaves, and you pass those out as they're working in their journals, and they're going to nibble on those and evaluate those as they're writing their responses in their journal too. So it's kind of a cool way to have that initial exposure with the lesson. The rest of those are going to be on their own. So that's the first week. No Shows from Bro and 5 Senses Food. So over a 2-week period of time, it can go really pretty quickly, and it really is pretty easy to implement. Most of the supplies we have are things going to be pretty accessible within households or in settings you happen to be in youth centers or campuses, wherever you guys might happen to be leading these sessions. I do want to mention that as we have food exposures, it's a big part of the success of kids knowing and trying and becoming familiar with and being willing to adopt new foods in their diet. The data shows that depending on the age of the kid, there's a different number of food exposures they have to have before they become familiar with it enough to be willing to adopt it in their diet. And it happens to be the younger a person is, it seems like those seem to be a little bit a smaller number as well. So that we're always having the first exposure be a fresh sample, and the second exposure is going to be this prepared recipe. And the kids love working on these recipe experiences together. So moving into week 2, there is a cool activity called Plant Parts We Eat, and it starts aloud with a read aloud. There's several of these books that are used throughout the curriculum. And if you have access to the books, that's great. There's read aloud versions of them on YouTube if you want a chance to share these with kids in that format. But it's a great story about a lazy bear and this clever rabbit, and they have this bargaining back and forth. And it's a great kind of moral story, life lesson with it too, as far as being willing to work hard. But with that lesson, the kids learn about the plant parts, the function they serve for the plant, and examples of different types of foods that come from those parts. So the kids know, and you guys know what different things are. So if I ask you what part of a plant a tomato is, most people know that is a fruit. If I ask you about a carrot, most people know that is the root of the plant, and spinach and lettuce are leaves. But there's some things that you'll see in the second page of the lesson there in the middle of that chart that you see. There is some cool things that aren't necessarily what you thought that they were either. So as an example is kids who are asked what part of the plant does potatoes come from, they're going to be surprised to learn, even though those grow underground, they're actually stems. They're modified stems. What's cool about the onions is they're the same thing. They're modified leaves called bulbs that grow underneath the ground. So the kids are going to learn some different things that they thought they knew that weren't really right there. So they're going to teach their parents some things, and the teachers are going to learn some along the way too. What's cool about this is also a great chance for kids to earn their service learning requirement, which is a big part of kids completing Junior Master Gardener curriculum experiences and earning a certification, is they get to have a chance to be able to give something back. So one thing that could happen with your groups, whether it be a youth group or in a more formal setting like a school setting, is there could be a plant part canned food drive. And the way this happens is, instead of just having a food drive, and a lot of groups have these things before holidays of Thanksgiving and Christmas, where they're encouraging parents and kids to bring in canned goods, things that would be part of a food drive. Those usually have pretty good success, but a way to really maximize those is have the kids be the ones who are in charge of it, because if the kids are leading it, they're going to be more bought in, and they're the ones who are doing it. So the way this works is, of each of those 5 days of the week, you have a different plant part featured, and the kids can use some of the kit resources that are part of the JMG website and print out the promotional signs about the plant parts canned food drive. And on Monday, the kids are encouraging their peers to bring in root crops, and on Tuesday it's going to be leaf crops and so forth. So with each of those days, there is an announcement that can be read that kind of tells kids, has this little piece of what these root crops are and these leaf crops are and stem crops are and so forth. But you have kids potentially being a part of bringing in these foods each day of the week, and they're learning a lot along the way. And like I said, because it's student led and their ownership is in, it's going to be a lot more successful of a drive experience too. So we love that, the plant parts canned food drive. Don't crowd me is cool. The only resources you need here is 4 chairs, because we're going to have kids learn what it feels like to be planted too closely together. And the idea is we're going to have 4 of the kids be volunteers, and you're going to have them come up, and they're going to be carrot seeds that you plant. And they're going to start kind of growing. But then right beside them, you're going to plant some broccoli plants that are going to be sitting on the chairs and standing up in the chairs, because the broccoli go taller than the carrots, and you're going to have them start to grow and spreading their leaves. And let me show you what that looks like if you're working with a group of kids. There's a shot of them there. What's great about this is kids will get planted too closely together, and they'll feel kind of crowded, and they'll be each other's space. And we say, we know it feels crowded, and even though plants really can't feel crowded, what's going to happen? What's going to be one of the detrimental things that happen to the plants if they really are planted too closely together? And their minds go back to that PLANTS thing. They know they're going to have less air and less water and less nutrients they're going to be able to access if they're going to share it so closely with so many other plants. around them. So the idea with this one is it's kind of funny and silly, and it's gonna be a good photo op too. But when they feel crowded, that connection to feeling something, they'll be more certain when you're planning your planting in the future, to make sure that you're not gonna be planting things too close together, because you want them to have their plant needs met. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a minute, Jenny, and we're going to let people have a chance to get their supplies. I just noticed there was a question about the supplies for this. And if you want to do this after the fact, if you didn't bring the stuff to be a part of it, that's okay too. But you're going to need a paper towel and some carrot seeds, some other seeds if you'd like, and then also some school glue. And I'm going to see if I can show my. Can you still see my screen right now? Can you still see me? I'm not sure they can still see me or not.
Yep.
Can you? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is what I want you to get: your paper towel. This is going to be a planting template that we're going to use to put our carrot seeds into the ground. So if you get a paper towel, the tip here is get some that are square. Those ones that are in the segments you can kind of tear apart. You know, you still have to have at least two of those together, so it's that square kind of shape-ish. And some shapes of paper towels are a little bit more rectangularish, you know, and the ones that are square, it's about 11-ish square inches is probably the biggest ones we've really seen that are more ideal for this kind of thing. The other one is to use is those 6-inch square napkins that are folded, because when you unfold those would be a nice square foot. But the idea is this is going to be a template we're going to attach our seeds to for the square foot gardening experience. If you've never heard of square foot gardening, it's the idea that you're going to plant things as closely together as you can for those plants to still have all their needs met. And so when you are square foot gardening or planting closely but intensely, but not too close, you are making sure all the needs are met. You're reducing the amount of water that is lost. You're reducing the amount of weeds you have to compete with, and you're maximizing, you know, your harvest for the area that you have. So what you have to know if you're going to use paper towel gardening planting templates is what the space requirement is for a given crop. And with carrots, and it happens to be the same thing with radishes, you can plant as many as what? Let's see, Jenny, if our audience knows this, how many, put in your chat responses for me, how many carrot plants would you guess can grow in about 1 squarish foot as we're putting the seeds and we're going to attach them to this paper towel? So you want to make a guess at that? I will tell you that some plants like squash need a ton of space, and pumpkins need a ton of space, but carrots and radishes, and Kim, you already got this. Kim was the first one to be able to get it. You can plant 16 plants into one. Jesus, depends on how many rabbits are there. That's true. You always plant enough for you and your critters around you. So Kim and the rest of you guys, if you have this, I want you to fold this paper towel into 16ths. And this is really an easy one because you're folding it in half and folding half, folding half again. And when you fold it, make some nice little sharp creases. So it kind of looks like that. Can you see that? And then your job is, guys, is you're going to take a bottle of your glue. Now, this is important. This is Elmer's school glue. This is great. This is Washable's glue too. This is also Elmer's. Those are both great. But just because it has an orange cap on it and it's Elmer's doesn't mean you can use this, because the way this is different, this glue all than this is not water soluble. And we're going to attach the seeds with the paper with this glue. They're not going to be able to germinate, so they're going to be encased in this little plastic-like glue capsule. So we're going to take one of these bottles. We're going to have you lay it down, put a tiny dot of glue in each one of these squares along the way. Okay, so each one has a dot right in the middle. And your next task is to take one of your carrot seeds and put one carrot seed in each one of these little squares too. So we're going to have a perfectly arranged grid of carrot seeds. So I'm going to let you keep working on that while I'm still talking. We'll come back to this at the end of this session too. Okay, we'll see how many people have brought their supplies to be able to do that, or even doing it after the fact. We'll give you a chance to actually win a door prize if you did this with us today. So I want to show you some pictures of some kids doing this activity. And this is a girl who is a 3rd grader, and she is using her clear gel glue, and she's putting her 16 dots in on the 16th space. And if you look at the different space requirements I mentioned before about carrots can be planted 16 per square foot. Somebody asked about spinach seeds. That's in 9ths. Leaf lettuce can be in 4ths. Broccoli and things like tomato plants and bell pepper, you can get away with having 1 per square foot there. So you have one little area that's there. But what's different is once you have these kids with this group, whether you assign them a certain crop or they're going to be the ones who are picking based on what available for a given season, then you have them work together to lay out those crops in the room that you're working in, of what the arrangement should look like. And so this is what this group of kids is doing. They're trying to decide how they want their garden area to be arranged. The garden area is this rectangle garden space. You'll see that in a minute. And they rearranged it. And it was kind of this thought of having the broccoli plants planted around the carrot plants is they want to make sure they had the taller plants towards the back of the garden. So then they go outside, and you see them laying the paper towels on the ground. I'll show you a video of this in just a little bit of the kids doing this exercise and this teacher leading that along the way and how they poke them into the ground. So it really is kind of rewarding. So once you step away from that garden, these plants are perfectly planted. You see a perfect little grids, these little dots into the garden where the seeds have been inserted in. If you're concerned about the academics, we got some really great progress on kids understanding of fractions in a very relevant way as they're trying to fold these papers into those different arrangements of numbers too. One of the resources in the curriculum is this garden planting chart. You'll see carrots that's listed there. It has some data for you that's important, how many days it takes for carrots to emerge. Those are kind of slower growing plants, so it can be 12 plus days for those to emerge. You see the number of seeds per paper towel in that next column of 16. You see all different needs for the other plants below that. You see how deeply you should plant them, because some seeds are just kind of barely pressed in the soil and some seeds are a good inch into the ground. The other thing I'll share with you too, I don't know if you can see the planting depth. Some of those are transplants, because some plants like broccoli and like the tomatoes and cauliflower, those things do better by transplant than by seeds from most areas. And so an example you'll see later of how the kids reserved that transplant space when they were planting into the garden area from the video I'll share with you. One thing I'll show too is that the planting depth is going to be blank in that little section, because it is dependent on where you happen to live. Even within your state, there's likely at least a few different planting zones that are there. So if you're not already a part of the extension world that you can reach out to be able to find out some planting information for your area. And one resource we try to do is point people back to their local extension office. So if you go to this URL, jmgkids.us, which is our JMG website, /my county, you can click on your state and get some information, contact information for your given state. But if you're impatient like that, you might just want to Google search something. Here's your tip. If you're not already a part of the extension world, if you will just Google search your county name, your university name, the land-grant university, and the words planting chart, it's great what you can kind of come up with. And I'll show you first with the ones that we found in our local area. And you see the planting chart. This is a great visual because it shows where things can be planted during ranges of time during a given year. And there's carrots that are listed there. And the next season coming up, because we are in a hot season, it's not really until September, until the fall gets here, before we can start planting carrots. But let me show you a couple other ones. Since we, Jenny, are being kind of sponsored by the North Carolina State Extension, this is a chart, I think, from the Raleigh area of looking at, I think it was Wake County, if I looked at it correctly. But you see for that part of the country, really later June starting, you can start planting carrots there. And if you have anybody that's in that Nevada area of the country, there's a chart there that's kind of nifty. It shows you that they have little S's on those charts that they specify your planting by seed, but really in July they can start planting. So it's a good chance for you to start planting when you're going to be planting those charts, if you happen to be working with kids in the near future. So be sure to use those, because if you're planting things at the wrong time of the year, you're not going to have much success. You're not going to have much success trying to plant watermelon in December or tomatoes during the cold times of the year too. So make sure you plant at the right time of year. I love this. Kids are going to be a part of the student-led garden experience, and they have to be the ones who are doing every step of the way. And one of those experiences is having students choose the garden location, doing site evaluations of which of those evaluation locations will provide best job for providing for plants' needs. Okay, so this also has one of those great read alouds. It's in a book called A Place to Grow, about the seed that's trying to go place to place to find its needs. It's probably my favorite books we have within all of our curriculum projects. This is a picture of what the site evaluation looks like. You can kind of see the criteria of does the area have sunlight? Is it near a water source? Does it have good soil, and so forth? So what we'll do is we'll have kids go out and pick the best site out of 3 locations. And as leaders, we would pick these locations. And this is an example of one at a fictional site that we'll do with you virtually really quickly. Is this campus has 3 areas. We'll call this first one like the parking lot location. And the second one is called the flagpole garden location. And the third is the shade tree garden spot. And those are all 3 spaces that we're going to evaluate. And based on the information that we have, we'll also share with the kids where the water sources happen to be for that site, and then where they have access to their room, where storage for tools is going to be, because all these are considerations as they're evaluating sites, right? One thing I'll tell you too, in this example, I love this example too, because this is a real one. We had some of our teachers who are struggling with their garden projects. Is they chose, because they were working with the early childhood side, and they don't want their kids to be hot during those warm times of the year. So they wanted to plant their garden literally underneath a shade tree. And the great thing about that is the kids were shaded, but vegetable plants need sunlight. And if you're not a horticulture person, that's okay. You need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, really, at least, for these vegetables to be able to grow and produce these things that we want to be able to eat. So as you have the students that are part of this group going in and they're evaluating this, and they're giving they're circling their numbers for each of those, giving a score based on each of those sites, they're going to come up with a consensus of which is those better locations. And you can have a cool group discussion about that. And what's great about that is you could have these garden locations that are already installed by somebody else. And if that's the case, that's good, but the kids are totally missing this experience. And so some of our leaders say, what if we already have a garden space that's there and we really can't move that location? Well, the idea is you still have the kids evaluate that location and 2 other locations. And you're certainly not going to make those other locations be better if you can't move the site. So you may have the existing location be one and the shade tree may be another. And the third one may be something that's a little bit too far away for accessibility, but still having kids come to the conclusion that this site is the best one to be able to meet those needs. You don't want to skip some of those student leadership experiences. And one thing I'll share with you, if you're on the academic side of ways to be able to cover some more of these standards, and I love this, is you can't just have kids be able to say, yes, this site is better for whatever reason. You have to have them substantiate that. And the idea is if they're going to substantiate something like proximity to a water source or to where tools are stored, one example here in this extension of this lesson is having kids come up with some measure. So in this example, they had to walk it off, and they decided that one was closer, got a better score because it was only 50 steps away, whereas the other one was 150 steps away. And that would make it warrant, that better score along the way. So what's cool about this student-led garden project is the kids are doing it. So we are not going to have the kids build the garden or install anything until after they pick the location for the garden, of course. And so that little spot between weeks 4 and 5-ish is kind of that sweet spot of garden location time that we're not going to have that put installed until that window of time. So as we're thinking about starting this project, you're not going to be planting, really installing the garden until a month into the effort. There's some things they got to learn, beforehand along the way. I'll show you a couple more for this little section of the curriculum. One is balloon hot potato. They're going to learn about examples of foods from different food groups. It has this cool experience where the kids are going to have this debate. You're going to divide kids up into these 5 groups, and they're going to have information on their card, and they're going to argue. They're going to argue with each other that their group, their food group, is more important than everybody else's, and they're having little talking points they can kind of share and educate their friends based on that. And so as this guided debate happens, you as a leader leading this, they're going to ultimately come to the conclusion that one group is not the most important. They're all vitally important along the way. And then the game ends with the activity ends with a game where the kids are passing around different color of balloons or balls. And the idea is as they have one they land on, there's a color code to which food group it is. They've got to think of examples of foods that come from that food group. Okay. I'm going to pause there. And Jenny, we're going to ask for people to be able to, if they want to chat something or turn their mics on for the question, is I want to ask them if you have any questions or you have some concerns or you have perceived obstacles that you would see, if you're going to be helping to lead a group get started, if you're helping to teach another group about helping to support groups getting started, what are your questions or what are your concerns? Just based on what we've shared so far along the way that you have about starting a garden project. Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, so I have a question which I've realized seems to be like the challenge that has been really prevalent in like my area for getting garden projects started. It seems like, there's sites, some sites that I've talked to have like garden beds already, and just like they're looking for someone to like help get it back up and running and things like that. Or like they're like, oh yeah, we have all this space and we want to start a garden, so it's like from scratch. But the one thing is like they have the expectation that we're going to be the ones that are constantly maintaining it and things like that. And those partnerships, they don't have like they're not willing to have staff or volunteers at that site kind of help pull
Let me
that
ask you,
weight.
what is the location? What is the venue for that site? Where will the garden actually happen at?
So one of them was at a school, and then another one was like at a nonprofit.
Okay. But there's a physical location that people are there regularly or semi-regularly that are part of that too.
Yes.
And are the people that are there too also the students that are there? Are the students at that site, or are they just using that site for a garden purpose?
Yeah, no, the students are there at that site. Like
Well,
it's
so this is
it's
part of it. And there's two parts of this. I'll answer both of them. One is if they want somebody to have a garden that's going to come in and be a part of the garden effort because they like the idea, that's one thing. If they're bought into the idea that the students are going to be a part of that and they're going to benefit from that's the next level, right? So if kids are going to be coming to be a part of this garden project that you're helping to lead or helping to support a teacher that's going to lead, they're going to be a part of this at least a couple of times a week. And if even it's spread out for to longer period of time, the bottom line is this garden is a living thing and it does need to be tended to. So even if it's just 2 or 3 days a week that you're going to have these students or some leaders helping to bring these students out, if nothing else, just kind of keep the watering during that time of the year that may need to be watered. There has to be some kind of level of commitment on that front. So if you are an example of a person who is potentially, that volunteer is going to be doing the leading or the bulk of the leading of this, the other side of that is they've got to commit their willingness to make the space available, make the kids available, and during the times of the week, maybe 1 or 2 times, not even that much, depending on how often you might be there, that they're going to be available to tend to the garden, keep it watered or even harvested as needed. The other part of that is we always have the question too, this project is only a 10-week project, and I can guarantee once you get started, this garden will still continue to produce past that 10-week period of time. So really the hope is that this is just a starting point. And so once you have this group of kids that are there and they're engaged, they're going to continue to want to have this garden grow produce and maybe even to the next season. So I'll answer the full part of your question in a few moments when we talk about one of the activities where kids take some ownership and they divide into responsibilities into committee groups of caring for different aspects of the garden. That's a great question.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of times, they like the idea of it.
Sure.
But then
there's
not
work
willing.
involved for sure.
Yeah, they're just not willing to put in the effort.
Well, let me share this with you too, because I think this may help get your eyes and your mind around some of how the project is going to grow and how it's going to help be successful, how you're going to really increase the chance it's going to be successful and it's going to thrive. Is that whole section of the curriculum has the grow resources made available. It presents content in a way that helps you have the least number of steps and supplies and resources to help guarantee it's going to be successful. So I'll just share with you as a background, we're a part of the extension world. And if you have worked in your areas, in your regions, in your counties with master gardener volunteers, you've got people who are expert gardeners. And those people are there because they're passionate about gardening, and those who really want to work with kids even more so. And they have lots of opinions about what the best ways to have school and youth garden projects. And there's lots of options. And you see examples of some that are there. Some are raised beds, some are in ground, some are bordered by cinder blocks, some are bordered by plastic containers. You see one that was in one of the warmest regions that we've ever worked with in the west part of Texas. And they actually had these straw bales that were buffers of moisture and heat for these raised bed gardens. So there's all different kinds of ways to do this, but really to make it friendly for people who don't have garden and horticulture experience, we're trying to make it as simple and easy and quick and as inexpensive as possible. So what we have is what we call our quick and easy garden kit. And so it breaks the information down for you, for leaders, for teachers, for the students, and the components of how you gather the materials, how you build the garden, and how it's going to be planted. And the cool thing about this, even for starting from scratch, we have done this several times. If you can have a single volunteer that has a drill and these boards are being delivered that are part of the campus, you get them here, and we'll talk about resources too, is it goes from start to finish, literally having a blank slate to having the box built, to having the soil poured in about a 45-minute window of time. So even if you're starting from scratch, if you're going to have a raised bed garden, you kind of get past a lot of the effort of having to till up areas or bringing and tilling into that soil. Some of the work is reduced because you're controlling the drainage and the quality of soil with these raised bed garden efforts. So let me give you an example of what this looks like. And this is detailed in the book too. This garden area, it can be done a couple different ways and orientations and sizes, but the first one, as an example in the book, is this one. It's a 3 by 7 foot garden. And the idea is that you can, if you're a person trying to scrounge around to get the supplies brought in or bring them in yourself, it is a easy way to take these boards you can kind of get at the big box stores, as Lowe's and Depot kind of stores, to have those 10-foot boards chopped in these 3 and 7 foot sections in the back of cars. I'll show you what a picture of that looks like in just a minute too. And so you have these 6 crops that are featured in a given window of time. And that last row you see there is the kids making choice of what they're wanting to grow too. They can either grow more of what's already growing, or they may choose to grow some flowers in the garden or something else. It's something that's popular in that area too. So having a raised bed box, and here's an example of a teacher. This is a teacher going into I think this was with the orange apron. You might be able to guess what store this teacher happened to be at. And she was going to the lumber section, and again got that 10-foot board cut into the 3-foot, 7-foot section, got those times 2. And then the back of a truck, or you see in the back of a minivan as an example, having this whole garden, being able to be a part of that, and being able to make it accessible for delivery to the schools that way, even if you can't get a delivery from the store. And sometimes with when the parents that are there, they may have resources to be able to help volunteer to be able to move some of that material to the site. So I'll point you to a resource on the JMG website, jmgkids.us/LGEG for Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go. And let me show you some of the resources where they're at as we're talking about these sections. If you click in the Grow section, you can see these little steps, these resources for you guys that are under that teacher resource section. And specifically, the act of going in the store and getting the supplies or building the garden, it's a part of these video resources that are there. You'll see a class actually doing that. The kit has some PDFs that are built into the book, and it's also online that shows you the kit for making the garden. And that's basically a wooden box, y'all, that are just bordered on all 4 sides. You have 3 exterior wood screws at each corner, and that is an untreated pine that we have there, and that will last for several years before it needs to be updated or changed. And sometimes you may have longer lasting than that. Some people don't have problems with using like a treated lumber or some other materials, but for untreated pine, you'll at least get 5 to 7 years from that before you have to do anything about that. Sometimes the most expensive part of having a new garden project is getting the good soil that's going to be filling up it, the soil as a starting point. But that's one of those things that you kind of get what you pay for when you're buying soil. You don't want to just fill it with topsoil that sometimes is mostly sand and sometimes a lot of weed seeds. There's some good mixes you can get that are made for vegetable raised bed garden efforts. So you see the supplies that are listed there, the 2 boards that are cut into the 3-foot and 7-foot sections, a dozen exterior wood screws, and you have to count, how many bags of soil that you're going to need if you're going to bring that soil in. The great thing about these boards, if you happen to get a board that is 12 foot tall, your raised bed garden, you got to think about that. 7 foot by 3 foot, that's 21 cubic feet. So as you're trying to think about how many bags it is, a lot of times these bags that you see there in that little illustration, those may be 1 or 2 cubic feet in a bag. So do the math on how many bags you need for that. But the right side I want to draw your attention to, because we have these kids, and these are 8 and 9-year-olds that are being the ones in charge of sweating and lugging and working hard to bring these soils in from the truck into this little courtyard area of the school space. So make sure they're involved in every step of the way. For it to be a student-led and sustainable project and have buy-in, they're going to be involved every step of the way. Some of the resources that are there. I may have shown you. Oh, this is all I want to show. I'll circle back to our conversation from earlier in the paper towel gardening experience. If you look in this grow section, you click on planting the garden, you'll see this video of this teacher we showed earlier, having her kids going outside and putting those paper towels into the ground, how you go about planting those. So I'm going to see if I can get this to play and the sound to come through for you as well. Oops, okay. Y'all see that video now? I'm not seeing that it's playing. We tested this before.
Not playing now. It was playing when we tested it. But
we tested it before, you guys. Let me see.
Yeah, I saw it before.
Well, and heck, I always want to show you that, but I was going to show you a little clip of this. But the bottom line is that if you go back to these resources here, you can click directly to watch that video. But it starts out, this was in a classroom setting. So it's a teacher with her group of students. She goes outside. It shows the kids laying the paper towels down. One trusty kid with a water wand. So as the kids are laying those down into the ground, the water wand kid is the one that helps to water. So it helps tack them down. And you kind of see the kid that's there behind the teacher. And that kid has a pencil, literally just poking those seeds into the ground about 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch deep, and controlling that poke and kind of patting it down and pulling that paper towel away. The other thing I'll draw your attention to that you'll see in the video if you look at it also is those kids with the trowels. Those are the kids that were planting in the broccoli plant. So those kids, they had to pull their paper towel away and they had to put their broccoli transplant right in the middle of that location that was reserved for the broccoli too. So paper towel gardens are a great way to get kids engaged and learn math in a relevant way and make sure those plantings happen. Because what's funny, if you've worked with kids at this age, you guys, oh my gosh, you give kids a handful of seeds and say plant these seeds every few inches. And, sometimes, a lot of times the seed is the same color of the soil you're putting it in. And so you'll have piles of seed and clumps of seeds and big empty spaces, but there's something that's really kind of hard about laying a paper towel on top of paper towel when you're putting these into the ground. So this is a great way to have the kids connect to that whole concept of square foot gardening along the way. I was gonna get one more chance to play, Jenny, but it's not doing it for us. Yeah, it worked for our test before we started, but they'll just have to go on their own. So let me pause here again, and we'll come back to questions about gardens or garden experiences you've had, or raised beds, or some things maybe that even didn't work. Any questions that I can respond to? I'm trying to look at the chat too to see if there's anything else that is there. Some questions that have popped up. Yeah, reaching out to your local master gardeners for support. Part of the issue that we have, and I'll just tell you, because we work with lots of master gardeners a lot of the time, master gardeners are sources of information and sources of expertise, and they're willing to support projects. What happens sometimes is master gardeners are called by groups, by schools, to come in and clean out a bed and do the big laborious part of kind of recovering something that's already been kind of taken over by weeds. And so that part of a garden project is really not a part of that particular kind of group of volunteers purview. Really, they're a source of information and that passion about gardening. They're also, we've seen from county to county, depending on who you happen to reach out to, sometimes the leadership is different from one county to another, and sometimes they're really more into doing youth garden support programming than others. And so I think at the very, very least, you reach out and see if there's any source of support for your projects. But like I say, don't expect those master gardeners just to be one to come in and do some of the hard kind of moving of soil or cleaning out of weeds. They're more your source of info and expertise for supporting along the way. If you are going to have those garden work days, we're going to talk about getting the buy-in and having that sweat equity, having those parents be a part of those along with the kids. That's a great way to be able to do it. But again, the idea of having a raised bed garden, once that's in place, you have a fresh blank canvas of soil that's just begging to be planted, having a successful garden experience along the way. Okay. All right, let me get back to my set here. All right, you can see my screen again now, right? So let me show you a couple more of these lessons, and this goes back to one of the questions that we just talked about, the idea of having the kids get into groups. If you have 2 or 3 kids, it can be divided into these different groups of that size. If you have a group of several kids, the idea is you're going to have kids have different responsibilities. So there's going to be a watering group, there's going to be a weeding group, and there's going to be a feeding group. So taking care of the watering, the weeding, and the fertilizing. And then on top of that, you're going to have some kids that may be different groups. Like there's one group we had for our larger groups, and they were the garden security team. And their job was first to make sure everybody else did their jobs. Their job was also to make sure no tools were kind of left behind, the area was clean when they came back after the fact too. So that was garden security. And there was also a thank you committee, and their job was just look for ways to express thanks for those people that were supporting the garden project along the way. Because sometimes there were some parents that were really great volunteers, or some businesses that were part of being able to be really generous at donating those kinds of things. And they had those kids, their job during that work time, that garden work time, was just to find ways to acknowledge that, whether it was writing thank you notes, or posting some video on a social media that was saying thanks, or taking some artwork that's gonna be dropped off to that business. Their job was just to find ways to express that gratitude for folks that were helping their garden project be successful. This is one of the most straightforward lessons along the way. And it's one of the most effective about being able to have that kind of impact. There are some other cool ways that you can have kids be creative as they're learning. And this is one activity I wanted to share with you too. It's garden graffiti. They're going to research the crops they're growing, and they're going to have the task of having to create these little pieces of artwork that can be installed into the garden. After they do a little research, learn about the veggies, they're going to take what they learn, and they're going to then represent it in the form of 3 pieces of art. With each of the crop that's growing, the activity has them create a nutrient stone, a benefit stone, and a label stone. The label stone, you can see, has the name of the crop. The benefit stone shows you physically what benefits, our primary benefits that we get from our bodies, and we have to represent that in some way. And the nutrient stone shows what that happens to be really high in. And so the benefit stone, carrots really do benefit your eyesight, and they really make your nighttime vision better. So these 3 examples, these kids' artwork was represented by painting the stones that way. The adaptation of that, and I like this even better, to be honest, because if you're working with limited budgets too, and you have less time, having some of these paint sticks that can be donated to the group, and choosing Sharpies, you can have kids decorate those Sharpies in that same way. And the idea, they're going to be communicating information to people who are coming by the garden, who are passersby of the garden, to encourage them to know what's growing in the garden, what the benefits from eating those crops along the way. So then we get to the eat section, and this is cool because kids love eating. And there's an example of one of our 4-H leaders at this site that was doing some recipe demos. The cool thing about this is you are going to get a chance to introduce these kids to things they may have never eaten before. In fact, some of the adults in the room, some of the parents that you're a part of may never eaten before. I don't know how many people on the call who has never had Swiss chard or who's never had bok choy. I bet there's at least a few people on the call who haven't had those experiences too. So these are crops that are especially high in at least one nutrient value to be able to on this nutrient planting list. And these are what makes up the crop choices that make up this curriculum. If you look at the website, one of the resources as you're introducing these different kinds of recipes that support this is jmgkids.us/garden kitchen, and you'll see a section of these videos of being shown in a kind of kitchen kind of a setting that you see there on the left. And on the right side, you'll see actually a video of this 4-H agent leading this group of kids. And this one happened to be at a school setting. And you guys, she had 2 classes of 3rd graders and several parents that were watching this. And she masterfully had this experience of having the kids engaged, having some stuff that was pre-prepped, you know, so to make up for the time difference, having the kids demonstrate how to do things, and then having kids together mix things up and serve portion cups out and then start serving out to the groups. So everybody had a chance to sample that. But what was great about that, she as a extension person was there demonstrating, and she empowered a couple of parents to be able to take on that responsibility then for the rest of those 5-ish recipes they had for the rest of that 10 weeks period of time. She was able to empower these parents to be the ones who were leading those recipes from that point forward. So resources at jmgkids.us/garden kitchen are good for you. So there's some cool resources that I want you to see within the curriculum. Also, if you're going to have these vegetables that you're going to be able to prep and sample and kind of know more about before you have these fresh demos for the kids, they're going to be evaluating. You'll see that in this section too, this eat section. There's one thing I wanted to point out to you about Swiss chard. We mentioned one that maybe a lot of you haven't had before. Swiss chards are super high in the nutrition levels for different vitamins. But look at this vitamin K. Is that crazy? 374% in a serving. But people don't know how to eat Swiss chard. So this section of the curriculum shows you how to do that. You can eat it raw. You cut away the stem. You can kind of slice away little bite-sized pieces. So if you just have, 1, 2, or 3 stems, you can sometimes do a handful to several to a large group of kids just with a few leaves for that sampling. So that is another resource that's a part of that section. The recipes you might choose to do within the group that you're working with are there, and they're in English and Spanish. If you happen to have a population of parents around you that are non-English, that's a resource for you along the way. So the last section that we'll share is this Go overview, the Go section, the Get Up and Get Moving section of the curriculum. And these are just physical activity breaks. And so even in our more formal settings where we have teachers that are doing academic things or responsible for teaching, the cool thing about this is the kids are not only having fun, they're not only taking these physical activity breaks, these are really truly brain and body boosting experiences, because the research shows even if kids do a take a walk break or team bubble burst challenge break, while they're doing that, they're re-engaging their brains in a very purposeful way and getting their brains are firing. All synapses are a part of that experience, and they're going to be more effective learners after that. So even for a campus, even for a classroom setting with lost instructional time for taking these kinds of game kind of breaks, the data shows that kids are more effective learning afterwards. So you recover that time too. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go sections. One thing I wanted to share with you is that we have a brand new partnership with a company called Edgate, and they're going to be working to make these correlations to different state and local and national levels teaching standards in different areas. So starting next week, these are going to come online to our website. So if you happen to be in a setting, again, if it's an after-school program that you're working with groups, if it's somehow affiliated with the school, or even if you're looking for funding to support programs, being able to show that we are also working towards these academic goals for these campuses, sometimes that can generate some more awareness and some more support too. So you can check back at the website starting next week for those resources. All right, let me pause again. Any questions I can stop on stuff we covered so far before I continue? I want to point out some of the online resources and online curriculum kinds of things that you have access to along the way. Any more questions? You can just call out, and I'll look back at the comments there to see if there's anything I skipped.
So you said earlier that this is like a 10-week course. Yes. Those like the Eat and Grow sections that you were just going over, are those embedded into that 10-week, or is that 10-week? Because it seems like those first 10 weeks, like those lessons are pretty intense and like
It is
time
those 10 weeks.
consuming.
So to answer the question, yes, it's embedded. So that the learn experiences are certainly part of those lessons. And some of those experiences that they're going to be outside of working in the garden are encompassing that too. But in addition to that, you're going to have these recipes that you're going to be inserting in along the way. So the idea is that you have these 2 times per week for this 10-week period of time, but then sprinkle it in throughout that entire 10 weeks. You're going to have about 6 different recipe demos that would be a part of that. But the intent is that it's incorporated in that little 10-week window of time. The great thing about that, we'll talk about some of the different ways you can potentially use volunteers, because as we think about the recipe demos, depending on the site that we're at, sometimes those master volunteers, there's sometimes a group called master gardeners, or some states, some counties have master wellness volunteers. Sometimes they're just parents. If there happens to be some kind of a food service available at the site you're at, sometimes those people have been volunteers to come lead some of these recipe demos too. So we'll talk more about how those volunteers could potentially be plugged in along the way. But that 10-week time, and sometimes, like I said, it goes beyond that. But what we hope happens even after that 10-week period of time is encapsulated and kids finish the formal curriculum part of that, there may be an ongoing connection to maybe a garden club that will still come together on a regular basis just to maintain and harvesting along the way.
Okay, so are we like shooting for like 2 to 3 hours a week for this curriculum? Is that kind of how this is designed?
Well, and it depends. What's funny is the groups we work with, sometimes they may only be in a situation where they only get a chance to access a group on a weekly basis. And so you have to adapt that for that whole window of time. And it goes the other extreme where we have somebody, they have programming, they're responsible for daily 5 days a week for like 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day for programming and trying to insert it into those little areas too. So ideally, if you shot for that, if you plan for each of those lessons being probably at 45-ish minutes as a typical window of time for each of those. And then if you think about every week to every other week inserting a food demo as a part of that, yeah, I think that'd be fair to say 2 to 3 hours a week.
Yeah, I was asking mostly because the way that a lot of our programs like this are structured in my county is like more of a weekly basis where it's like we're coming in once a week type of deal. So that's why I was kind of asking and trying to figure that out.
And let me ask you, when you do that, how much time do you have them when they come in on that weekly basis? Is that about it?
It depends on the site. I mean, it's anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes typically is about what we do programming.
Sure. I think this would be fine for that too. And do those sometimes go less than 10 weeks or more than 10 weeks? Or what is your typical window of time that you offer programming for? Or is it kind of every week throughout the year?
I mean, it depends. It just depends on how it's designed with the partnership. Like I was trying to do a junior master gardener program at a school that we started in March, and like the plan, they had garden beds and the plan was to, plant the gardens and everything, and then the kids were going to be tending to it like over the summer and stuff like that too. But like, and that was scheduled for, I think we had it scheduled for 9 weeks, but then it kind of changed and then they had to cut the program short, so like we didn't really get through a lot of
Well, here's a tip, and I'm not sure if your area, are you an extension person yourself?
Yes, I am.
Because we had, let me tell you this tip, because this is one of the aha moments I had. And this was, there's programming that happens in different areas. And sometimes it's a school-based, sometimes it's a 4-H group, sometimes it's YMCA, Boys Girl Club, sometimes it's scout organizations. It all varies, but primarily you've got some onus of leadership that's a part of the leader who's doing that, whether it's a leader, a youth leader, or a teacher. And her experience was when she was helping to support these programs and getting training, start off to kind of kick off things, she said, I found that helped to reach out and kind of have my hand on the teacher every now and then. And the follow-up explanation was she just planned about every week to 10 days that she might just shoot an email or text a teacher or make a call or stop by a site just to kind of be present, just to respond to questions or whatever. But she said it made a huge difference just being purposeful at reaching out to those people on a regular, semi-regular basis of keeping them tabbed to things, because sometimes people, even who are the most well-intentioned, they just get busy, and sometimes those front burner things demand attention, and after that's on the front burner period of time, that back burner thing maybe kind of gets forgotten. So just kind of bring it to the front again is worth that little bit of planning and effort for sure.
Yeah, I think with this situation it was a little bit, I mean, there was like a coordinator, and I think the teacher that ended up with it, like she wasn't as hands-on as
Sure.
So I mean, it
buy-in
was
from the teachers too, right? At that point, if they're part of the helping to plan on the front end of that too. That's a good point. Well, speaking of teachers, let me share these 3 resources for you, and these may or may not be applicable to the groups you're working with. because there's some online content to support the efforts as well. Pre-COVID, there was a virtual course for teachers that showed all of these lessons being taught from this, 45-ish minute lesson down to about a 7-ish, 8-ish minute condensed video. And these were in classroom kind of settings, but for some teachers, it was really good to have them see it happen with a group of kids. And at the end of the video, the teacher would kind of look at the camera and kind of share some tips on managing kids for that particular lesson. During that COVID window of time, we shifted to have a virtual version of this for kids too. I got ahead of myself. This is some shots from the teacher curriculum. And the teacher curriculum, by the way, shows the videos of the lessons happening. It also has some what we call sharpening science background information. That's some gardening, nutrition science stuff that's really kind of cool. That's a part of that along the way too. And then this particular content also has access to the PDFs of each individual lesson. So you not only have access to the video components for that window of time, you also have access to a PDF printouts of the content along the way. But then during the COVID time, for those kids that were learning at a distance, it was a virtual version of this created, and you see screenshots that were a part of the curriculum that you see there. And it was a cool experience. We had kids all over the country that were plugged in, and parents would have to get these supplies and they would follow along with us. And we had all the content that was there on top of these sharpening science videos, as well as the gardening how-tos. And you see our chef that's there at the bottom of talking to kids on doing these recipes. It was a cool experience. And it's the same content too that you saw within the regular curriculum. So each of those 20 lessons is spread out there. What made this one a little bit different was even after the COVID window of time happened, we found out that teachers were sometimes still using that content within their classrooms. And so what happened was, even for in-person learning, they were still using this as a resource. So we made this available as a teacher video lesson library. So that's accessible there by teachers being able to click on each of these lesson videos and these sharpening science, garden, and plant science videos as a part of that. So if you're in any application where you think some of those online resources that are part of that coursework would be helpful, for sure, reach out to that. And that kind of content, as well as curriculum, is available through, if you click on that little store button at the top of the page, it points back to the agency Extension Bookstore that we have in our state that sells that content. Even if you're not interested in course kind of stuff online, let me point to some of the free resources that are available to you on the website and in the appendix of the curriculum. One is in the back of the appendix of the curriculum. Behind the exclamation point tab of the Learn, Grow, Eat, Go is a service learning information, some details on facilitating those projects. There's also a section for some parent letters. So if you're starting this program, it's a great way to inform the parents about what they're going to be doing over the next several weeks, and maybe how the parents could help if they want to be a part of supporting that effort. There's weekly letters that go home too. They're kind of cool. It's available in English and Spanish. And one cool example of that is if a kid brings home the paper towel garden experience that some of you guys did, the parents may be like, what is that? So on that particular week, it explains what that activity is for, what you do with it, and the kids may bring that home, and it staples that parent letter along the way too. So that's another resource for you guys as leaders and volunteers. The other thing is, if you do have some parents that respond back to that initial service and they're willing to help, there's all kinds of things that they can do on a weekly basis to support your efforts along the way. You kind of see on that top one, you see that for that first volunteer task is prep and deliver the carrot samples for that first week, that sample tasting. So what's kind of cool about this, it kind of gives you a layout of some parent happens to say, I can kind of help on weeks 4 and 5. There are some tasks associated with those weeks that you could point them to as volunteer support along the way. We want you to enroll and register your kids into the program. And again, there's no cost for that. And it's set up a simple leader profile for you or for the teachers or leaders that are leading it there locally. What's cool about that is all the groups have access to completing the registration, also have access to completing earning certifications at the end. So what's cool about that is your kids can have their certificates that are printed out that has their certification name that's a part of that. It's just clicking on completion and what certification your kids did, inserting the kids' names. People always ask, what are you doing with the kids' names? Those are not stored for other than just to print the names and be able to pre-fill those personalized certifications along the way. And there's some faces of kids that have been a part of getting the certifications too with their work. All right, so come back to this. Who had made one of those? Anybody in this call that actually brought the supplies to make one of these? Any hands raised along the way? Because if you did, or if you do, even after the session, I'm gonna give you a chance to win a door prize. So Jenny, here's their task. If you have made one of these, or if you do make one of these over the next day through, I guess, the end of the day tomorrow, so we'll keep this open for people who are part of this call. I'm going to let you have one of these 2 choices of books if we pick yours. And what we're going to ask you to do is if you are a Facebook person, if you will post a picture of your little selfie of you holding this up, and if you'll keep these terms with your posting, junior master gardener, military kids, as a part of your postings there, we're going to have our intern search for that. We're going to pick one of you guys, and we'll reach out to you and let you pick if you want to copy the tops and bottoms book or the cool Place to Grow book as part of that door price. All right, I'll stop one more time for questions. Anything else? And again, with our size group, I can have you turn your mics on if you'd like, or share some of your thoughts, or if you have some experience with gardening that you can kind of elaborate on, we'd love to hear from you too. Honestly, I agree. Both books are great. And there's 3 other books that are part of that curriculum set that are fantastic. One of my favorites that's a part of that curriculum is called 2 Old Potatoes and Me. Have you happened to have seen that book before? It's a great one. It's a great one too. It's steps of being able to have a daughter planting her potato garden with her dad and her grandpa. All right, if you are not a social media person, we'd love for you to be able to get on at this in different social media that we kind of post and share and get information out about the curriculum, about program, about events, about opportunities. So please check us out on those little fronts. jmgkids.us is the website, and there's a place, if you scroll down the bottom of that front page, that you can get a subscription to our free newsletter that comes every other week.